Honda's built some of the greatest motorcycles ever made, bikes that changed how the whole world rides today. But not every swing was a home run. In this countdown, we reveal the 5 absolute worst that disappointed riders and the 8 best that redefined performance and innovation. From industry-defining legends to uncomfortable missteps, these bikes tell the full story of bold experiments and occasional stumbles along the road. Here's the ultimate Honda Hall of Fame and shame, starting with the worst list. Honda ST 1300 Pan-European. You're running highway speeds on a fully loaded touring bike, passing trucks at 80 miles per hour with police gear mounted everywhere, and the bike starts to develop a lateral oscillation that shouldn't be there. That's what we call the pan weave. The ST 1300 was built as a large displacement sport tourer with a 1261cc liquid-cooled 90-degree V4 engine and shaft drive for durability and low maintenance. Police departments adopted it worldwide because of its alternator output, cargo capacity, and weather protection. The problem showed up under specific high-speed conditions when rear loading was heavy, especially with top boxes, radio equipment, light bars, and crash bars changing the weight distribution and aerodynamics. It's a system behavior where speed, load placement, suspension setup, and tire condition all interact. The severity matters because this was supposed to be a stable high-speed duty platform. Factors like tire pressure, rear preload settings, load height, and turbulence from passing vehicles all played roles. Many civilian owners never experienced it, which is why the framing needs to be conditions-dependent instability rather than every ST 1300 being unsafe. But when a touring bike that's expected to handle heavy loads at sustained speeds develops oscillation issues under those exact conditions, it damages trust in the platform's core mission. The bike's long wheelbase and substantial wet weight were designed for stability, which makes the weave reports even more concerning. When law enforcement agencies started changing training protocols and operational guidelines specifically because of this behavior, it signaled that the issue had real-world consequences beyond internet forum debates. Second, Honda VF 750F Interceptor. Honda's engineering reputation was built on bulletproof reliability, and the early VF V4 line threatened to undo that in a single product cycle. The VF 750F was an early 1980s performance street bike that helped define the modern sport bike template with its 748cc liquid-cooled V4 and aggressive styling. It was a flagship statement from Honda during their push into V4 performance architecture. The scandal was premature camshaft and valve train wear, showing up earlier than anyone expected on a Honda. This wasn't high-mileage wear after 100,000 miles. It was top-end degradation, appearing when the bike should have been in its prime, creating audible valve train noise, loss of crisp performance, and metal contamination concerns. The repair costs were significant relative to the bike's value at the time, and there wasn't always confidence that a fix would be permanent without updated parts and correct setup procedures. What made this qualify as one of the worst wasn't just the mechanical issue, it was the reputational damage to Honda's core brand promise. When your flagship performance model becomes known for top-end problems, it erodes buyer trust across your entire lineup. Competing explanations exist about whether the root cause was oiling design, metallurgy, manufacturing tolerances, or maintenance practices. Honda implemented running changes over time across the VF family, and survivor bikes that were updated and maintained properly fared much better than repeat offenders. The early VF line forced Honda to spend years rebuilding credibility in the V4 segment, and the shadow of those cam problems followed the platform well into the 90s. Coming in third, Honda CX 650 Turbo. Factory turbo motorcycles in the early 1980s were technology showcases aimed at delivering big power without huge displacement, and Honda's CX 650 Turbo from 1983 represented the second wave refinement of that concept. The mechanical execution was sophisticated for its time, a 673cc liquid-cooled transverse V-twin, with turbocharging, fuel injection, shaft drive, and full fairing with high-tech instrumentation. Honda didn't build a crude experiment, they built a genuinely advanced motorcycle, with EFI and turbo control that was impressive by early 80s standards. The problem was the market collision. High MSRP, elevated insurance costs, and economic conditions made it a tough sell when naturally aspirated alternatives were getting very fast very quickly with less complexity. The ownership proposition became niche. Fewer trained technicians understood the system, more unique parts were required, and maintenance logic was more specialized than a mainstream inline-4. Turbo bikes also delivered a different torque character. Softer off-boost response followed by a stronger mid-range surge as boost arrived, which felt less predictable than the linear power delivery riders were used to from naturally aspirated engines. That unpredictability became another adoption barrier. The turbo motorcycle trend collapsed quickly, and the CX650 Turbo became a symbol of brilliant engineering that the market simply didn't want. Low production and weird tech made it collectible later, but collectability doesn't mean it was a success when new. Today, these bikes command premium prices from collectors, but that doesn't erase the fact that they were a commercial failure that taught manufacturers a harsh lesson about complexity versus market demand. Number 4. Honda DN01. When you try to create a new category by blending a cruiser, a maxi scooter, and a concept bike, you risk building something that doesn't satisfy anyone. That's exactly what happened with the DN01 from 2008 to 2010. Honda tried to position it as something fresh with a 680cc Class V-twin and the HFT automatic transmission system, which was a hydromechanical setup designed to vary ratios smoothly while using lock-up behavior to reduce the rubber band feel of basic CVTs. The goal was automatic convenience, with more direct drive sensation than traditional scooter transmissions. The problem was twofold. First, the price-to-value equation didn't work. At launch, it was priced near or against far more capable sport tourers and performance motorcycles, making it hard to justify. Second, the buyer identity was unclear. It was too expensive and heavy for people who wanted scooter practicality, and too unconventional for traditional riders who wanted a recognizable motorcycle experience. Real-world ownership added friction. As a niche model, parts pipeline over time became a concern, especially for panels, trim, and transmission-specific components. Service familiarity was limited because fewer shops saw enough DN01s to develop deep experience with the platform. It's a clean case study in how excellent Honda build quality doesn't guarantee market success if the product thesis doesn't match how people actually buy motorcycles. The DN01 proved that being different isn't enough if you can't answer the question of who it's for and why they'd choose it over established alternatives. Production lasted only 3 model years before Honda quietly discontinued it, and resale values dropped hard because the used market had the same identity confusion that plagued new sales. The worst of it all, Honda Goldwing GL 1800. This one needs context because the Goldwing is historically respected and popular, but a specific early production window had a serious manufacturing defect. The 2001 to 2002 affected range had a frame weld strength issue that falls into the structural integrity category. This isn't an annoying quirk or a cosmetic problem. It's a safety-critical defect class because frame weld failures can lead to sudden loss of suspension support. The severity is amplified by how touring bikes are used. They're heavily loaded with passengers and luggage, operated on long trips across variable road conditions, and racked up high mileage. Those use patterns make frame integrity essential, not optional. The real-world context makes this worse. Touring riders depend on their bikes being stable and predictable when fully loaded at highway speeds, sometimes hundreds of miles from home. A structural failure in that scenario is catastrophic. For anyone considering an early GL 1800, verification is critical. Check whether the specific unit had the recall inspection and repair completed with documented dealer service records. Inspection should focus on the affected weld areas described in the recall procedure, and evidence of proper remedy means documented completion, not just a previous owner claiming it was done. The reason this remains defensible as a worst entry even though most bikes were fine is simple. Severity-based lists don't require most units to fail. They require the downside, if present, to be severe enough to justify inclusion, and frame structural defects absolutely meet that standard. When the foundation of a motorcycle is compromised, nothing else matters. Now for the good stuff. Honda didn't become the world's largest motorcycle manufacturer by accident. These 8 bikes are the reason why. First on the list, Honda Super Cub. Over 100 million units produced and counting. That's not a small deal. The Super Cub isn't just the most successful motorcycle ever made, it's the most produced motor vehicle line in history, and it's still going. Launched in 1958 as a step-through underbone motorcycle, it was designed for mass daily transport with a low seat, leg shields, simple controls, and an approachable riding position that's comfortable for everyone. The original C100 featured an air-cooled 4-stroke OHV single with a 3-speed transmission and an automatic centrifugal clutch, meaning no clutch lever to worry about. The core architecture stayed consistent across the Cub family, with horizontal single-cylinder engines ranging from 49 to 125 cc depending on the market, semi-automatic gearboxes, and pressed steel underbone construction. It normalized the idea that a motorcycle could be everyday transportation profession rather than a hobby machine, and it created an entire ecosystem of local manufacturing, parts supply, and service know-how worldwide. The Cub spawned multiple sublines including work and delivery variants, commuter trims, higher displacement versions, and modern retro editions like the C125. It became the default platform for delivery fleets, small businesses, commuters, and rural mobility in many regions. The durability design, combined with parts interchangeability across eras, made it unusually easy to keep alive, which is why you still see first-generation Cubs running alongside modern versions in cities across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Real-world ownership costs are very low, with simple service requirements like oil, chain maintenance, valve checks, and tires. High survivability in harsh conditions came from modest power output, low stress, and conservative tuning that prioritized longevity over performance bragging rights. The Super Cub has the broadest parts availability footprint of any Honda motorcycle family globally, which means you can keep one running pretty much anywhere on Earth. When a single motorcycle design outlives empires and reshapes global transportation patterns, it earns its place at the top of any best list. Second, Honda CB754. The year was 1969, and the mainstream market didn't yet have an affordable, reliable inline-4 with modern braking and electric start as a unified package. Honda dropped the CB750 and changed everything. This was a 736cc air-cooled inline-4 with SOHC, 2 valves per cylinder, 4 carburetors, a 5-speed transmission, and chain final drive. The front hydraulic disc brake was era-defining for an affordable production bike, and electric start came as standard equipment alongside high refinement that competitors couldn't match at the price point. Claimed power commonly cited around the high 60 horsepower range for the original 1969 version, with real-world top speed testing in the 120+ miles per hour range, depending on conditions and gearing. It effectively created the template for the modern superbike category by delivering multi-cylinder performance with daily reliability and forcing a global competitive reset, especially for British manufacturers who suddenly looked outdated. The CB750 proved that speed with civility and repeatability could be mass-produced, and it redefined what sophistication, instrumentation, durability testing, and consistency meant for affordable motorcycles. The platform became a foundational reference point for standards, muscle standards, and performance road bikes. Decades later, the massive aftermarket and restoration community means parts and knowledge remain widely available. The CB754 didn't just win its era, it set the standard that everyone else had to meet for the next decade. British manufacturers spent the entire 1970s trying to catch up to what Honda delivered in year one, and by the time they got close, Honda had already moved on to the next evolution. The bike's influence extends beyond motorcycles into automotive engineering philosophy, proving that refinement and reliability could coexist with performance in ways that reshaped consumer expectations across entire industries. Coming in third, Honda Goldwing GL1000. Heritage sells, and in 1975 Honda decided to build heritage from scratch, with engineering that nobody else was attempting. The GL1000 introduced a 999cc liquid-cooled flat-4 boxer-style engine designed specifically for smoothness and longevity under sustained high-mileage touring use. Shaft drive handled final drive duties for low-maintenance long-distance operation, and the bike featured electric start with an emergency kickstart mechanism stowed on early examples. The interesting packaging decision was placing the fuel tank under the seat to keep mass low, with a faux tank up top used for storage and ancillary components. Initially sold without factory touring, fairing, or luggage, which helped ignite a major aftermarket touring industry as owners started building out their bikes for serious distance work. The GL1000 established the platform that would become the dominant long-distance touring benchmark for decades. Its engine layout and cooling system were purpose-built for sustained high-mile, high-heat operation, and it proved touring comfort could be engineered into the base machine rather than just bolted on with accessories. The GL1000 rapidly became a foundation for full touring builds through fairings, luggage, and windscreens, influencing how touring motorcycles were designed and sold thereafter. Goldwing became synonymous with durability, passenger comfort, and high-mile reliability expectations. Ownership realities include known smoothness and long service life when maintained properly, with restoration and part support remaining strong relative to many 1970s machines, due to the platform's enduring popularity across multiple generations of riders. The flat 4 configuration delivered vibration-free operation that made 8-hour riding days feel manageable, and the liquid cooling meant consistent performance whether you were climbing mountain passes in summer heat or running interstate slabs in any weather. Honda built a motorcycle that could legitimately cross continents without drama, and they did it when most bikes were still considered weekend toys. Number 4. Honda CBR 900RR Fireblade. In 1992, the litter-class sport bike world was stuck in a horsepower arms race, and Honda showed up with a different answer. Instead of chasing displacement bragging rights, they chased minimal weight, compact dimensions, and real-world speed through agility. The first-generation Fireblade used an 893cc liquid-cooled inline-4 with 16 valves and a dry weight commonly cited around 185 kilograms, which was class-leading at launch. The wheelbase came in around 1405 millimeters, compact for the class, with an 18-liter fuel capacity typical for sport bikes of the era. It resets sport bike engineering logic by making lightness and chassis balance the headline, rather than just peak horsepower numbers. The result was a bike that made big bike acceleration and top speed usable by improving turn-in, transitions, and braking behavior through mass reduction. Competitors were forced to respond with lighter, more compact designs across the 1990s because the Fireblade showed that being fast everywhere mattered more than being fast only on straights. It became the reference point for real-world fast sport bikes, and its design philosophy fed forward into later supersport and superbike development across brands. The first-generation Fireblade didn't just win comparison tests, it changed what manufacturers prioritized when building the next generation of performance motorcycles. Weight became the enemy, and Honda showed everyone how to fight it. Riders who came from bigger, heavier machines talked about the Fireblade feeling like a 600cc bike with a liter bike's power, which was exactly the point. Honda proved that you didn't need to build a freight train to go fast, and the entire sport bike segment spent the next decade trying to copy the formula. Fifth, Honda VFR 750R, the RC30. When homologation rules require a minimum number of street-legal bikes to go racing, most manufacturers build exactly that minimum with the cheapest parts they can get away with. Honda looked at those rules and built a full race bike that happened to have lights and a license plate. The RC30 wasn't a production bike with race parts tossed in. It was a factory racer they let you buy. 748cc liquid-cooled 90-degree V4 with gear-driven camshafts because chains and belts introduce slop that matters at race RPM. Single-sided swing arm for fast wheel changes in the pits, and because it looked incredible, close ratio 6-speed gearbox with a slipper clutch when most street bikes still had basic wet clutches. High-grade materials throughout for weight reduction and durability under racing loads that would destroy standard components. Claimed output around 110 plus horsepower in unrestricted markets, but the numbers don't tell the story. The bike was built for high RPM stability, consistent fueling under hard use, and chassis precision that let you brake later and carry more corner speed than anything else on track. It became one of the clearest examples of a street bike being a direct extension of a factory racing program, and its racing success plus genuine engineering integrity made it a benchmark for homologation specials. Collectability today isn't just about rarity, it's about low production numbers meeting actual racing-grade architecture that was legitimately built to win on Sunday and sold on Monday. Ownership means high parts values and specialist maintenance expectations, but strong community knowledge exists and originality heavily affects value. The RC30 proved Honda could build Exotica when they wanted to. Sixth, Honda Africa Twin XRV 750. Ask adventure riders who've put serious miles on one what they think, and you'll hear the same thing. It just keeps going. The XRV 750 ran from 1989 to 2003 as Honda's rally-inspired adventure bike built around one core principle: get there and get back without drama. 742cc liquid-cooled 52-degree V-twin with SOHC, 3 valves per cylinder, 5-speed, and chain drive. Long travel suspension, 21-inch front wheel, and protective underbody skid plates made it clear this wasn't a street bike cosplaying as an adventure machine. Fuel capacity in the low 20-liter range gave extended range between gas stations, with tall seat height and upright ergonomics designed for standing on the pegs and controlling the bike off pavement. What earned the Africa Twin its reputation was survivability in remote conditions where parts availability and mechanical simplicity matter more than electronics or peak horsepower. You could fix most problems with basic tools and determination, which matters when the nearest dealer is 1,000 miles behind you. The platform went through multiple updates across the 90s with bodywork changes, frame refinements, and equipment variations depending on year and market, but the core mission stayed consistent: reliable transportation across terrain, that would stop most bikes. Real-world durability when maintained is excellent, though age brings realities like cooling system maintenance, suspension rebuilds, and tracking down certain plastics on older examples. It established Honda's credibility in the large adventure segment well before adventure bikes became mainstream, with a reputation tied to actual long-distance capability rather than marketing promises. The Africa Twin name returned on a modern platform later, but the original XRV 750 remains a distinct era defined by simplicity and endurance over complexity. Next up, Honda XR 650R. High-speed desert racing teaches harsh lessons about what breaks and what doesn't. The XR 650R was Honda's answer after learning all of them. Built from 2000 to 2007 as a purpose-designed desert weapon using a 649cc liquid-cooled single-cylinder with SOHC and 4 valves. Aluminum frame marked a major upgrade for the XR big bore line, with dry weight around 280 pounds, and chassis geometry optimized for bombing across open terrain at speeds that would terrify most riders. This wasn't a trail bike that could go fast. It was a fast bike that could handle trails when necessary. Long, stable, and planted over rough ground with suspension built to absorb repeated hits at sustained high speeds without fading or breaking. It earned a reputation for extreme durability under conditions that destroy lesser bikes: heat, sand ingestion, high RPM for hours at a time, and impacts that would crack frames or blow seals on anything not purpose-built for desert abuse. The bike became one of the most dominant big-bore off-road platforms of its era in desert racing, setting a benchmark for what fast across the desert actually means versus tight technical riding where lighter bikes excel. Many examples got street-legal conversions, depending on jurisdiction, though the off-road bias remains obvious with tall gearing, aggressive cooling demands, and vibration typical of big thumpers running hard. Maintenance isn't complex, but it's not forgiving of neglect or shortcuts. Correct jetting or fueling, cooling system attention, and rigorous air filtration discipline pay dividends in reliability and longevity, commonly modified from emissions-restricted stock form in some markets, with performance changing materially based on setup and intended use case. Rounding out the list, Honda CBX 1000. Fire it up and the sound alone tells you this isn't a normal motorcycle. 6 cylinders running across the frame, gear-driven cams chattering, exhaust note rising like a small displacement race car. The CBX 1000 from 1978 to 1982 was Honda's engineering flex. A 1047cc air-cooled transverse inline-6 with DOHC, 24 valves, and 6 carburetors that existed to prove they could build anything. This wasn't about practicality or sales volume. It was a flagship halo bike designed to be expensive, complex, and unforgettable. Claimed output around 105 horsepower for early models, with dry weight in the mid-240 kilogram range, heavy but inevitable given the hardware involved. The smoothness became legendary. No vibration, just an ascending mechanical symphony that felt more like precision machinery than a motorcycle engine. 6 pistons, 12 valves opening and closing in perfect harmony, creating a riding experience that was as much about feel as performance. It proved Honda could engineer Exotica-level complexity into production street bikes at scale, not just one-off prototypes or limited factory specials reserved for wealthy collectors. The engine's width and mass shaped everything about how it rode, making it more grand tourer than sharp-handling sport bike, but the presence was undeniable. Park one next to anything else from its era, and the CBX makes everything else look ordinary. Ownership reality includes service complexity with 6 carburetors to synchronize and more valve train components than typical 4-cylinder engines, increasing both time and parts count for maintenance work. Strong collector status today, with values heavily dependent on originality, condition, and documentation proving the bike's history. The CBX remains one of the most ambitious production motorcycle engines ever mass-produced, a monument to what happens when engineering ambition overrides market research and common sense. Honda's built everything from the most successful vehicle in human history to a few bikes that probably should have stayed in the design studio. The worst ones taught lessons that made the best ones possible, which is how engineering actually works when you're willing to take risks. If you're shopping for a used Honda, knowing which models had real problems versus which ones earned their legendary status matters more than brand loyalty. Drop a comment if you've owned any of these bikes and let us know your experience overall. It will help others decide. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.